Aloha. With this video, I'm going to do a little movie review of A Wrinkle in Time and go into pretty much what I already been speaking about in reference to what this movie might be about. I never read the book, and I just saw the movie today. And I just wanted to go real quick over the general outline of all the things that are connected to the subconscious that are being programmed. The things that are being programmed into the subconscious by the Hollywood industry, the New Age industry, and the mainstream Disney programming that's in and around us every single day. And this is just another example. This movie is just another example of how intricate this system has been and how intricate the system is getting in reference to its grips on the people and the grips on the people's subconscious, because that's what this is really talking about. This is any of these movies, when you watch them, it's not about the plot. It's never about the plot. It's never about the characters. It's about the underlying macro subconscious storyline that's being programmed into not only you as a parent, but your children. And that's the biggest part, because it's the children that are the ones that are going to eat up this subconscious programming without any filters. They have no filters to discern from what is false and what is true in reference to reality. So when we understand that your conscious reality is being manipulated, you can also understand that your subconscious, or for a more colorful example, your dreams are a powerful space. Your dreams are a space that a lot happens because you're dreaming in every moment of the day. You're even dreaming when you're not asleep. So that's work that's being done that you're doing. And when you are blocked from that reality, but not only blocked from that interpretations of that reality, but also programmed to think and act and feel a certain way about that reality, if it exists at all, when you're in those bubbles of distraction and deception, it's hard to get out. It's not only hard to get out of that space, but that space that you're in when you're locked into those belief systems and those barriers from basically yourself, that's what actually turns people or presents the atmosphere for people to suffocate underneath their own subconscious illusions and self-destruction that had been programmed from birth, from your relation, from pre-birth, from your parents, and then their birth, and then before they were born. This goes back in time. So this is why I kind of wanted to, I don't know if I'm going to get too much into the kind of like esoteric information. Most people who listen to this channel are already aware of the esoteric information. I'm more focused on the in the moment, like right now, what's going on? How does this subconscious programming relate to the mind control programs that are basically on the streets, like on the streets of the subconscious? What's on the real world spectrum? What's going on with the subconscious programming from industries like Hollywood and especially Disney? Because this was a Disney movie. Disney did this movie. All the previews leading up to, within the movie, leading up to before the movie played, were all Disney. They're all cartoons, so you know this is geared towards the kids. This is a total Disney movie, like Tomorrowland, same sort of thing. And something new happened that I've never seen before in any kind of movie. In between the previews and the movie actually starting, there was a clip in there from the director, which is very real. It was just a real life introduction into the movie, and pretty much just, I've never seen that before. But what that does is it makes the movie more real. It makes it more kind of like for you as an adult and the child, especially the child, because the child is being set up to kind of like activate this like, okay, well, this is not only just kind of realistic in my little child mind getting ready to watch this movie that my parents brought me to go see, but there's also another authority figure or adult figure that is engaged in the movie that actually believes in the programs that are within that movie. So it's another layer of realness, in a sense, fake realness in a sense, because that, like, I've never seen that before. I've never heard that before. They did kind of like little introductions or little clips of the movie even before it played, or little kind of like, I don't know, it was just weird, but it was noticeable. And it's another layer of kind of like setting you up to think and act a certain way. So in the movie, obviously, there's heavy duty globe imagery. There's heavy duty heliocentric programming. The father that they claim to be, and before I go any further, there's going to be spoilers from here on out. So if you're worried about that kind of thing, just, click off. I'm pretty much going to go break down the entire movie from the beginning to the end from my own perspective. And it's, if you are concerned with this storyline, then just go ahead and click off here. So yeah, it opens up the father that they're looking for. Okay, so first of all, there's so many things that are there. You have, and I'm just gonna glaze over these images because I've gone into great detail in previous videos. So this is just gonna be kind of like a confirmation of what I've already said in all these previous videos. So obviously in the mainstream media, there's this diversity, oneness, humanity, we're all one sort of new age mentality that is being promoted by the mainstream media to combat or at least appear to combat the racism agenda and the race program that is running rampant, and that's very much a part of the power grid and the power structure. So you have a so-called white man, a so-called black woman who have a mixed baby. That's Meg, the main character in this movie. They adopt a child who is a Caucasian boy, and then there's a friend, an older white young male that's the same age as Meg. And so it's those three kids that go into this wrinkle in time to go look for the father who disappeared, just like Tron. If you remember the new Tron movie, this basically the father in the Tron movie and the father in A Wrinkle in Time is if you can understand that, if you've seen the new Tron movie, came out in like 2010 or something like that. It's basically the same premise. So this mad scientist, he's not a mad scientist, he's just like a scientist who's dealing with space-time and reality and so on and so forth. So he's a scientist, his wife is a scientist. They explain it as his wife is more focused on the micro scale. So she goes into the atomic structure of reality, the smallest of the small. And then the father, he's more focused on the universe, the macro, the largest of the large. And he actually talks about, one of the main themes in there is he's talking about, like, he's going into the scientific studies in order to, speak to the universe. He wants to find out how to speak to the universe scientifically through like quantum physics and so on and so forth. So there's little hints, little new age triggers and anchors that are in there to make you think that Hollywood and Disney is benevolent. And the same thing goes for like the characters that are in there. It's no coincidence that Oprah was given the Cecil B. Award at the Golden Globes. It's no coincidence that she was given that award at that time before this movie and had this whole presidential speech thing happen all at the same time. It's no coincidence that happened. This movie came out and then like the Trump thing's going on, and yeah, so that went down. You have the father who is an actual NASA scientist. That's his character, is a NASA scientist. So that's how they make you think that NASA is actually real. They don't have to actually do anything. They just need to make an Armageddon movie or a Wrinkle in Time, or Sandra Bullock going to and talking about gravity, or Tom Hanks talking about Apollo 13, or who was that? Matthew McConaughey going into Interstellar, or Matt Damon going to Mars. They don't have to, NASA doesn't actually have to do anything. They just need to make a movie about it to make you think that they can and will be doing something. That's the whole point of the relationship between Hollywood and NASA. Hollywood keeps NASA alive. And the idea, the mind controls, the fairy tales of NASA, the science that gets pumped through the Discovery Channel, National Geographic, your public education system, all of that is designed to give fuel to the machine that is the Hollywood and public education industry. So they work hand in hand. They play off of each other, and they need characters within the movies to make the so-called real characters in real life, the real scientists, credible. And then what happens with the actors is that the actors never talk about NASA. They never talk about like how the realistic part of it. They play dumb mostly when they do in these interviews. Actually, that's not completely true, because the interviewer of the interview with these actors, when they talk about movies that go into like the quantum space, space-time continuum and all that stuff in the heliocentric universe, they never focus on that. They play dumb in that space, but what they mainly focus on is the light and fluffy new age so-called deeper perspectives of the movie. So they kind of they avoid the reality of the characters in there, like NASA and all this other stuff. They don't go into that. They leave that to the scientists, and then they just talk about the fluffy, I'm the, what was her name, Mrs. Witch and Mrs. What's-It and Mrs. Who or something like that. Yeah, I think those are the names of the witches. So you have the diversity program and the race, that whole thing being triggered. Obviously, that's a big part of the New Age community. It's just like, we're all human, we're all one, and what that does is just make you, that subconsciously and consciously makes you like want to be on that same team. When they say that, they're the superheroes against the villains who are the racists, who run, the people who only care for themselves. So subconscious, you don't really have to go into it too deeply. You just have to be on the cool team. So in that space, that's the cool team. Just like right now, what they're doing with the feminism stuff right now, you can't be a misogynistic asshole. You just have to be on the cool team, which is feminism, and be cool with Oprah and all these other women who are out there fighting for women's rights and Women's Day and women's marches and all this other stuff. It's in reaction to, but it's not true empowerment. It's kind of like the Black conscious community. People in there don't really go, or actually a better example is the Black Panther movie, where people are celebrating a fairy tale. They're celebrating an imaginary world, an imaginary nation, and imaginary characters, but it makes it real because the art directors of these movies actually use real images from real people and real cultures. So this is that whole chaotic field I was explaining in the last video, where the positive and the negative is promoted to you, and that's obvious. These are the good guys, these are the bad guys. And you don't fit anywhere in between, because you're just a regular Joe going to work, taking care of your friends and family, doing your job. You're not a part of the super bad guys, and you're not a part of the super good guys, because you're not powerful enough to be a part of the super good guys. And you're a good person, so you're not going to be a part of the super bad guys. So the only thing you have to do is be on the team of the super good guys, and then that's it. And then whatever the super good guys dictate as the information that needs to be discussed will be what happens in the timeline of this reality. That's how people get controlled, because they're lost in the limbo space of chaos, never really owning themselves, never really having any convictions in their belief systems, in their reality, and just really just going along with whatever the ocean washes up on the beach. And constantly it's just pollution and pollution and pollution being washed up on the beach by this mainstream ocean. Meanwhile, you don't see that the same system that's complaining about the ocean being polluted is putting that pollution in the ocean. They just televise to you how they're cleaning up the ocean, and just so for some reason these people or these things are putting pollution in the ocean, or pollution in the ocean. Just, and it's not just this is a metaphor for like the pollution in your mind, the pollution of your soul. That's what's happening right now. It's not just physical pollution in the ocean. If the people on massive scales are allowing that, then that means that there's a pollution in your mind. And if there's a pollution in your mind that allows you to actually have pollution on a massive scale in the ocean, then that means that there's a pollution in your spiritual reality, in your spiritual mind, in your spiritual soul, your spiritual essence, like who you are. So this is the shock wave, and there's a mind control for each layer of consciousness, the soul, the mind, and the body. And since you're locked into the materialistic versions of the physical reality, or the university institutionalized versions of the mind or the psyche, and the mainstream religious versions of the soul, you're locked into an artificial reality. These are these artificial realms that get created. And since people are breaking down all of those systems and seeing them for what they are, the system needs to upgrade itself in order to get a deeper lock onto the people. The way they do that, and one of the main ways that they do that, is through Hollywood and these movies, and getting into your child's mind before your child's mind even fully develops enough to defend itself from these mind control programs, both consciously and subconsciously in the dream realm. So meanwhile, what makes this even real in the reality is that your parents, or the parents who are watching this movie, they make it real for the kids. So the kids make it extra real when their parents bring them to see the movie. They also think it's extra real when they're talking, real world politics about people who were in their Disney movie. Oprah is one of them. And all these other values and all this stuff, Trump makes this realistic too, because every single day, all the late night talk show hosts, the comedians, the mainstream news, they're talking about Trump. They're talking about the system itself. It's giving itself energy. That it doesn't matter what kind of energy it is, what kind of focus it is. It's just kind of like YouTube. YouTube doesn't really care overall. It doesn't really care what's going on individually. It needs to make money. It's a corporation, like all these corporations. So if they're going to promote something that's going to make money, they don't really care on the macro scale. They're just going to get that money, just like a corporation. So the education system does this, the mainstream media does this, and pretty much every single aspect of reality does this in this mainstream mind control program. So you have the race agenda being deflected against. So they're not going to go into the psychology of racism, white supremacy, the origins of the colonial mindset. They're not going to go into that. The cleanup crew for that is just to say, well, we're all one. Everything's cool. We need to just move on and get over it. We're all good people now. We've evolved. That's what the evolution program and the Big Bang program is that it makes it okay for the travesties that have happened before now, because the humans of before now were less evolved. So they allowed that stuff to be carried out. All the genocide, the massacres, and all that other stuff. They're playing it against the people's subconscious. And just since people get all of their solutions from the same people telling them about these mind control programs, they're never going to think for themselves and think anywhere past what solution was presented to them by these mainstream mind controllers. So they're just going to soak up, the majority of people who don't think for themselves are just going to soak up whatever's going on, because people are always being taken to their wits end. Like it's just like, I'm done with this racism, I'm done with this, let's just move on. This is what the Civil Rights Act was back in the day, and this is what, stuff like technology is doing to people today. It's like, don't you like technology? Don't you drive a car and have a computer and go to school and learn this and go to the grocery store? And then what people don't realize is when they say that, they're actually subconsciously and consciously, for some of them, adding validity to the actions of this genocidal and just sadist system. It's just ridiculously so separated from the harmonics of nature. There's no humanity in it. This is what it really boils down to. It's the inhumane space versus this never ending connection to the soul. This is what exists inside of everybody. And when you only care about yourself at the expense of other people, you are sacrificing your own soul to an idea of a reality that has been presented to you by people or entities that soak off of people being separated from their souls. When you separate yourself, when this is like somebody who, like a child who gets abused or something and constantly just like shuts down as they get older, or they get abused of their whole kid then as their child, and then they get older and then they shut down into this kind of like dark bubble of nothing, because there's no trust there's no love, the list goes on and on and on. But what happens ultimately is that gaps get created in these people. The relationship between the soul, the mind, and the body it's like a muscle, just like your mind. If you don't use it, it's going to atrophy and then become some kind of glob of nothingness. And and it's funny that the movie, I didn't even know this until actually I heard Oprah say it, I think it was Oprah. Somebody said it in an interview. Somebody connected to this movie said something about the IT program. And I mentioned that before. The IT in this movie, or the bad guy in this movie, the ultimate evil, is called the IT. Coincidentally? No, obviously it's not at all coincidence that the IT movie came out, and that was also geared towards kids. That was also geared towards like it also mentioned the dream space and literally called it, and so on and so forth. Fed off the fear, fed off the child's mind, so on and so forth. This stuff makes this stuff really real for these kids and the adults, because the adults are still kids too. So since the adults don't know how to do anything, they don't know what to do with this information. It's affecting the adults as much as ultimately the same as the kid, because a lot of these adults, they don't know what to do with this shit. Most people are just going to work and they're not critically thinking about the universe or their soul, their mind, and body. So this is how people are being mind controlled into this shallow colonial programming, and then like just Democrats and Republicans are just the most weak-minded mess that's out there. Largely Hollywood and the public education system and these activists are locking that into your reality. So on purpose, mind you, at the same time. So we have the diversity programming, and that also ties into the orchestrated Black Lives Matter stuff that I was talking about. Just using all of this destruction in order to make a superhero out of itself, the IT. So this is why they can use people like Oprah, who had sponsored in her magazine Monsanto. As destructive as Monsanto is on a worldwide scale, Oprah she had that corporation in her magazine. and had to take that out. So there's no, these people do not care at all. There's no sense of any kind of realness in these people. It will disguise itself as the ultimate benevolent energy. This is why you have Oprah in there with Super Soul Sunday. She's pretty much backed by all of Hollywood. She's like the Meryl Streep. She's like the so-called Black Meryl Streep. That's what Oprah represents, not only in not in acting, but like overall, energetically, that's who she represents. So whatever she says is just like it's even more extra powerful. That's what it is. So that's why they use these heavy hitters to promote particular agendas, not only to the parents or to the adults, but to the children, because they got to gain that trust over time. So the race agenda is in there, the orchestrated stuff, like I said, in reference to the orchestrated Civil Rights Act back in the day. This is another version of that with Black Lives Matter and all these little talks here and there. Obviously, after that, you had the feminist agenda. So you have the women empowerment space that's going on, like I said, in reference to racism. They're not going into the psychology of the war against the divine feminine and the divine masculine. It's just going to present to the people the reactionary perspective of what's happening politically, what's happening in the government, what's happening on the news, what's happening on the streets, like on a very shallow version of the streets. But you know what I mean? It's like local news. It's like the mainstream media or mainstream news version of addressing something that goes well beyond the materialistic physical reality, even well beyond the psychological warfare, and deeply rooted in the spiritual warfare. This war on the divine feminine and the divine masculine is rooted in the spiritual nature of all living things, of all existence. And the alchemy that's being used to keep people away from realizing that is to dress up what is real in something that is generic or artificial. And then you buy into the artificial program because you think what the system is talking about is real. It's like, no, the system is just using real perspectives, real subjects to portray, to get people to think and act a certain way based upon the synthetic consciousness. Because you're powerless, but it needs you to make an agreement with certain things. People like Oprah, Reese Witherspoon, and Mindy Kaling, and all these other people that are in the Hollywood industry, they are there to make you pretty much sign your life away, sign your subconscious life away, accept whatever this system is doing. Those people work for the it and make it real for you. So when they have Oprah Winfrey literally saying this is the ultimate evil and we have to fight the ultimate evil, that whole movie was basically a good example of how the system makes superheroes out of itself by making supervillains out of a movie. And that's a perfect example of it with these witches that were there. She actually referred to herself as like an angel, or these angels, in an interview on the Colbert Show. And then in the movie, they kind of have that same sort of feeling. It's like these angels, and literally you're hit with this angel programming too. The Reese Witherspoon's Mrs. Her favorite planet, the name of that planet is Uriel, which is the name of an archangel. So you have all of this programming. A lot of people are not going to pick up on, and it's all perfect. It's all beautiful. You can speak to the flowers and all this stuff. The kids are going to eat this up. Even the parents are going to eat this up because they still, have a love for Alice in Wonderland and so on and so forth. And It's the same thing. It's like the flowers are chipper, or what's that word? They just speak. They just talk. If you want to know anything, you just talk to the flowers. They're the most talkative things in the universe, or something like that. Anyway, so you have the feminism, obviously, the feminism, orchestrated feminist movement that's out there, like the orchestrated Black Lives Matter movement. It's all funded by the same people. It's the same system. It's the micro systems that work for the overall it. And the people who work for this they get kickback. So like Oprah, she's a billionaire. So like she gets all that. I mean, that's her kickback. And then if she wants to go any further, she's not really going to have any choice. If they tell her to go further, she's got to do it. They don't have any choice. They want to make it seem like these individuals have a choice in this matter. But if the powers that be, the so-called powers that be that are behind Oprah said, look, I don't give a shit what you think about talking about, I'm going to need a message from God in order to run for president. No, it doesn't work like that. They just have those conversations with people like Stephen Colbert on television to make you think that this is a real human conversation, that these are real people that are having real concerns for, what's going on a massive scale. It's not. It's a show. Look at it as robots appearing to be human simply because their robot imagery is being projected through a camera. And through that camera and through all that money, once it hits your consciousness, the way you compute, the way you calibrate, or the way you read that language is filtered, and it's filtered through the same system that created the imagery. So the images and the filters are both designed to make you think that something that is very synthetic, very artificial, not only appears to be organic, appears to be realistic, but it is. You through your belief system. So that's how this system creates these belief systems. And these cartoons have been doing it forever. I mean, the cartoon version is just the child version of what happens in the newspaper, on the radio, on social media, on the mainstream media, television, movies, the public education system, scientism community. It's all one thing. Cartoons and child movies are just another way to do that. So you have the obvious feminism movement that's in there, specifically with these characters. Oprah appears as a giant, so there's this giant program, and she's larger than life. She's the head witch, so she's like the head angel. She's the most powerful one. The second most powerful one is Mindy Kaling, who is she only speaks in quotes, so she's not even. And the way they say it is that she speaks in quotes because it's kind of like painting. It's kind of like an image or a painting. It's going to speak 1,000 words. But so that's why. So instead of, showing pictures or 1,000 words and that, she just uses quotes. So it's kind of like, it's supposed to seem deep, but it's not very deep at all. It's actually very weak and shallow. But to the regular Joe who's never heard a Rumi quote before, who's never heard any of these quotes before, they're gonna be like, oh, that's deep, that's very powerful. But I mean, these quotes are all over the social media, they're all over the internet. I mean, this stuff is just being watered down to nothing. So that's what happened with her character. And that's another way that the system uses the realness of the people in order to make itself seem organic. That's another good example of how Hollywood overall uses and all of these industries, the music industry, the Hollywood industry, the professional sports industries, they just use these real people up. They don't allow them to be anything other than what they're told to be because they signed a contract for those millions and millions of dollars, basically signed their lives away. And they're just told to think and act and say certain things in certain places at certain times in order to project a certain storyline that is needed at a particular time. This is why Oprah is coming out with all this stuff. Just you think most people think like this is a coincidence. No, she's been quiet for a lot of years on purpose. She's been just gaining her little Super Soul Sunday crew storyline for years now in order to go public, and that's what she's doing right now, and it runs perfectly in line with Donald Trump. He's a supervillain, and then you have people who are surrounding Oprah who appear obviously as a superhero. It basically boils down to something like a can of tuna, as simple as that. It's just a tuna sandwich, just a little things added here and there, and basically before you know it, you're eating some bullshit. And it seems pretty good because they tell you, oh, you need protein and all this other stuff, and then specifically animal proteins and all this other stuff. So anyway, you know what I'm saying. So you have Mrs. Witch, who is the main one. That's Oprah. Then you have Mrs. Who just speaks in other people's words. That's why she's called Mrs. Who, and that goes into what I had been explaining. It's a lot of things that line up from stuff that I've said in previous videos before in this movie in reference to levels of consciousness. So when I was explaining the levels of consciousness between the checker game, the chess game, and then the 3-tiered chess game with the soul, the mind, and the body, those are 3 different levels of consciousness. The 3-tiered chess game, the horizontal chess game, just the flat chess game, and then the checker game. Whatever it is that wherever you are in your reality, you're going to fit in that game in some kind of way based upon whatever your comfort zones are and then whatever you're willing to go into. So I specifically mentioned the who as a level of consciousness that is being promoted by the mainstream media, that basically goes into the observation of people don't think for themselves. They just regurgitate other people's words and other people's belief systems. And since everybody's all crewed up or squatted up in like the cool crowd based upon the superhero and the supervillain, like this Black Lives Matter racism agenda and this feminism agenda with the politics and all that other stuff, it's all very shallow. Everybody just crews up and they don't really think for themselves, and they follow a person. They follow a who, and then just, copy and paste somebody else's beliefs onto their social media. So that's not even them. That's regurgitating what somebody else, that's their representative. That's what social media is. Social media is your representative. When you meet people in person, a lot of the times, people are uncomfortable because they've been so engaged in the online persona that the math doesn't equate in real life. So this is what Hollywood and the politics are actually really good at. They're really good at making synthetic versions of reality appear to be very real. Just like they make synthetic people and these robot-ass actors seem very real. Like Oprah, and like as if her and that agenda has nothing to do with the it programming. So you have the consciousness of the who actually exists to keep you away to figuring out the consciousness of what. As long as you're following somebody else and you don't think for yourself, you'll never start to figure out what is going on. So the what is another level of consciousness that takes work. Once you start figuring out and disassembling and integrating what is going on and remove all that other garbage from the who and all that other extra what garbage that's there, that's when you start going into how this stuff is going on, how the what and the who program is affecting us. How is this working? And that takes another level of study and education over time in order to remove a lot of the extra baggage from the what and the who programming and the newfound how perspective. So once you start disassembling the what and the who and the how, you start getting into the spaces of why these things are going on, why this how program is affecting us a certain way, why is this going on, what's going on, why is that going on, and then why are people locked into the who programming to not think for themselves, to not figure out what's going on and how what's going on is going on. Why? That's a deeper level. This is why kids ask that question all the time, because the kids they're not hindered, they're not bombarded by all this nonsense that's out there, so they can still ask why. And they're at the same time challenging their parents, which is what their jobs are. So you have all of these layers of consciousness, and subconsciously you have industries like Hollywood that are playing this role, and we don't even really see it. So you have Mrs. I think her name is What's It, that is the like apparent she's like the new witch or something. Her mission is to take the kids and help them find, she's in charge. Like if it was like a chain of command, it'd be like Oprah, then Mindy, and then Mrs. What's It, and she's like the squad leader. She works directly with the kids, with the students, and they do that whole thing. And she's still kind of like very human, like she appears very human. She's very kind of like judgmental, but it's judgmental with a purpose, in the sense that she wants the main character Meg to own her faults and her qualities and pretty much stand in her power and all that other stuff. So she has to kind of like in an old school way, kind of like push her in a sense to be herself. So that's what these angels or these witches represent. Now as Reese Witherspoon plays the What's It. She's that lady. She was actually the first witch that appeared in the house before they went on this whole journey. So you have the feminism, you have the race agenda, you have the heliocentric programming, you have NASA with the dad and the mom. They did show the Earth in this time travel, in this wrinkle in time, when they started to bend time, and then you can walk through this kind of doorway. What else was there? Oh, cymatics was also in there, and the guy, the NASA, the father, the NASA guy, was explaining to the daughter, the main character, what the universe is built up of these frequencies or these vibrations. It's all the new age stuff. It's new age triggers. So all the people in the new age community are just gonna pick this up and run with it. They're gonna think that Hollywood and this change towards peace and oneness that makes it look like that's appearing like the Hollywood industry is changing for the better. The new age people, they're going to get right on board. The people who are like completely oblivious to what's going on, and especially the people who are paid in that new age community to promote those particular perspectives. Oprah's got big friends in the new age community, and for some reason, people in the new age community don't quite put these pictures together. They don't really see it's not like, oh yeah, maybe it's true. No, this shit is for real. But a lot of people can't let that go. Same thing with Hollywood movies like this movie. People can't let that go, their feelings go about the new age community, because there's so much goodness in there. It's like that's not to say, it's silly to say something like crystals are bad or meditation is bad. No, this has a real thing there. But just like in the movie A Wrinkle in Time, there's a lot of good quotes and lessons and realistic things in there that need to be in there, so you swallow the whole poison. See, all those Rumi quotes and the messages from the storyline and the lessons that were learned and the love and the crying and the relationships and all that stuff, all that is there as a sugar coating around the poison, Just swallow it. Swallow everything Oprah says. Swallow the storyline of Hollywood. Swallow the storyline of Stephen Colbert and all these other people, because the villains are out there in your face and they tell you who they are. Swallow it. And once it gets down into your core, into your belly, and that sugar, you metabolize that sugar, what's left? Only the poison. And that poison stays inside of you, and it becomes more real because you're the one who swallowed it. You're the one who decided to swallow that. And that's why I said what gets me so pissed off about Disney and all these other movies is that the kids are going to eat this shit up. They eat everything. And Disney and all these other mind control programs are geared towards these kids. This is an inhumane industry that's geared towards children. That's how this time and this control system is allowed to expand, because right now these 10, 11, 12, and even younger kids who are watching this movie, 10 years from now, they're going to be the voters. And then they're going to be the ones who are going to follow in the footsteps of like the people like Oprah promote and the mainstream industry promotes. And then since they have these deeply rooted programs that go back to their childhood, you know how long it's gonna take for them to uproot that shit? People are loving right now. These kids are programming themselves to see Oprah as a superhero, to see Hollywood and Disney as a superhero, because of all the sugar. This like MSG sugar, this straight up like poison sugar. You get addicted to it as a child because it triggers chemical processes in your brain, like this dopamine drip. That's what Disney is. It's a dopamine drip. All the movies that get promoted every single year, they don't even have to go see the movies. They see the commercials and they want to go see those movies. And when they don't see those movies, that dopamine is still dripping in their whole reality. So they don't have to see it. They can just, if they don't see it, I actually think it goes deeper if they don't see the movie, because that desire fills in the gaps of all these other mind control programs that the kids never even know that were there. And now that you have in the internet and YouTube, these kids can just watch these reviews, and they can watch these what are they called? The trailers. They can just watch the trailer over and over and over again, and then they get most of the movie. They get most of the plot and all that other stuff, and then they fill in the blank. And since they already saw their superheroes in the commercial, that's all that needs to be done. You don't really need to go see the movie. And in factual fact, if they see it, then they actually have more of an opportunity to disassemble it, because it's you see all of the math, you see all of the science. It's there. It's very tight. And anyway, that's just my explanation of how like all that stuff affects people, because this movie was a good example of that. So it's heavy new age. It's all new age programming. It's all about oneness and the light against the darkness, and the dualistic programming, and it stops there. It's kind of like that, like I was explaining in all these other videos, the shallow layer of programming that doesn't allow us to go any further than what is accepted by the reality, or the mainstream reality. So we have let's see, I talked about the race agenda, the NASA agenda, heliocentrism, quantum bending space-time, or that whole doorway, and then good and evil, light and dark, and then Oprah. Another part of this is that the destructive part. So in reference to Hollywood, the industry as itself, it's just like war. So just as in the physical warfare, politicians make a decision. those politicians make you think that you made that decision based upon the mainstream media that programmed you to think and act a certain way. So when they programmed you to think and act a certain way through the mainstream media, that gave the permission to the politicians to act. And in reference to war as a whole, the troops get sent, souls, bodies get sent over to a certain area where other souls and bodies are, and they destroy each other and the land. And those people and the land is now destroyed. Now the system, who makes all these rules and is playing the pieces on the board overall, now they have to clean it up. Because just like they did in the mainstream media, when they convinced you to go to war, they created a villain. So now that you sent your troops over to a place to destroy this villain, there were casualties in that war. And now the land is also a casualty there. Now you have to rebuild it. So this is how the superhero becomes extra super and extra benevolent, because they're now rebuilding Iraq. They're now rebuilding wherever it is. All these wars all over the place, everywhere you go. They tell you that they're rebuilding, but they're soaking the land for all of its resources and planting more military bases. It's just like a dog pisses and marks its territory everywhere. This is what we're dealing with. So, meanwhile, this is how the people think, oh, yeah, this is all good. It's like, no. They lied to you in the first place for this action to happen, and now they're convincing you that they're the superheroes. The same thing is happening with another part of the movie, is that this movie is based upon, so keep that mentality of destroying something in order to present yourself as the superhero to fix what you had destroyed in the first place. So this is how this system can make itself appear to be benevolent and make itself appear to be your savior. That's the trick with the physical war. With the psychological war, the same thing happens. Your mentalities are being destroyed. So a good way to explain this is through the A Wrinkle in Time movie, where you have, on a massive scale, you have the destroying of the family. Like I said, the destroying of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. Well, the strength of the people is also the strength of the family, the strength of the culture, the strength of the relationship between the father and the mother and the children, and the father and the mother. So we can see in the so-called black community, the single mother program is an attack. It's an attack on, specifically in the United States, for the indigenous people, the so-called black people, who are tricked into being told that they were called African Americans, to believe into the root story and so on and so forth. The majority of the so-called black people here, the indigenous people in the Americas, the way that they were attacked physically, psychologically, and spiritually was, back in the day and today, we are hit with this cultural destruction, which is pop culture making you kind of hate yourself, hate your curly hair, so you got to straighten your hair. You hate your dark skin, so you got to bleach your skin. I mean, this stuff is all over the news and commercials, and everywhere you go, these products are everywhere. You have people hating who they are naturally. So that's a form of destruction. That happens on a personal scale. On a family scale, you have the destruction of the father, the emasculinization of the father, and the putting of the weight all on the mother. And so the mother now has to play the mother and the father, the masculine and the feminine. And what that does, what happens in that space is that the true feminine gets sacrificed in that space, because the overall society requires a strong masculine presence. So when you take the father out of the family, that turns the mother into the mother and the father, but the only thing that matters in society is how strong she is based upon patriarchal programming. So the mother sacrifices her true feminine essence in order to survive, in order to take care of her children. So nothing stands strong. You have no feminine divine feminine energy. You have no divine masculine energy. You have survivability. That's it. That's all you have. So that's not only that's just a good example is in the so-called black families in the United States, but that's across the world. It's just like destroy the family strength, separate the mother from the father, make them hate each other so you can own their children. That's how this program is constantly working. So you turn the men into women, you turn the women into men, and then and all of them are in these shallow versions of what a man should be and shallow version of a woman should be. That's a chaos. So yeah, that's another extreme, the positive and the negative, and the chaos is the extreme in the middle, which is the survivability space. You just have to survive. Don't think about activating anything natural and organic. Just survive. This is why the human resources are locked up by the monetary system and the colonial agenda and so on and so forth. You can't have any time. You can't have any energy to do anything real or organic. You just have to provide within that system. So specifically within this movie, the plot line of this movie, it's based upon like what breaks you down is the relationship with your father. So in this movie, the father disappears because the father is looking for the universe. He wants to go speak to the universe. So he disappears into this wrinkle in time, but he doesn't know that when he gets into that when he goes through that doorway of the wrinkle in time, you're talking about the extremes of the light and the extremes of the dark. And when he stepped into that space formerly, he was trapped in the extremes of the darkness. So he's gone. He's trapped in there, and the kids had to go get him. So the kids had to go get the father from. They didn't know that he was trapped in the darkness. They just thought he was just in the wrinkle of time world, possibly on some other world, maybe having a good time or whatever. But anyway, point being is that the whole thing that breaks you down and locks those storylines into your reality is the relationship between the children and the father. And the father is not there. So that is a big that's a really big thing in not just so-called black families in the United States, but everywhere, because the attack on the divine masculine is so great and it's so vast, and it's so effective. That's the better word. It's so effective that even fathers who are present in the household are still distant, still not even there. So you have all of these, both children and adults, who are being broken down by this movie because they largely have a lot of daddy issues. That because people are so fake in the mainstream reality, you don't have a real father. You just have, this guy who was, present, and a mother. Like, we don't have real definitions of what a mother is and what a father is, because the generation before us didn't know what a mother and a father is, and the generations before that, and on and on and on and on. Same thing goes for the masculine and the feminine. You don't know what the divine masculine is. You don't know what the divine feminine is. So the masculine and feminine. So you just, act like, oh, this is what it is. It's like, no, that's like a magazine or a Cliff's Notes version at best of what's really going on here. So that's what makes this real for you. And the art of warfare tactics that were used or just like I was explaining with the physical warfare, but this is more from the psychological warfare. People are in a psychological warfare every day because of their relationships with their family. And most of people have jacked up relationships with their family because they have a jacked up relationship with themselves. So you have this chaotic relationship that goes on and on and on and on through many, many layers of each individual. And one of the biggest titles and the biggest layers of all of these storylines is the people's relationships with their own parents, the mother and the father. And since the father has been attacked, has been destroyed, all men, specifically in the United States, there's a emasculinization program against so-called black men, but all men overall are taught to be this very generic sort of Beauty and the Beast version of a man, this Disney version of what a man really is. And since that Disney programming goes back, however many decades, you have however many generations who are dealing with these issues and these kids who are dealing with these issues. And that is a space of opportunity for the mind controllers. So they play the heartstrings of your relationships between you as a child and your mother and your father and your family overall, and friends overall. They play that to lock you into the political agenda programming that's happening largely in your subconscious and definitely in your conscious space when you see people like Oprah playing these roles. She's not only a superhero, she's a god. She's like the left hand or like right next to God. She's an angel. They present themselves as angels. But the system that they're working for is largely very demonic or destructive, is a better way to explain it. It's designed not for your creative expansion, not for your love and healing. It's on the macro scale. On a micro scale, people soak this up as healing. They're like, oh yeah, I got so much from it. That movie was very deep. It wasn't meant for kids. There's so many deep quotes and lessons in there. That's for the adults. That's the micro scale. On the macro scale, you are being subconsciously programmed to implode. Not only in your space individually, but what you represent as an entire people of your entire lifetime. From birth until your death, you represent that entire generation. So these mind control programs are designed to affect you on that scale. So, like I said, what happens when politicians send soldiers over to war, they destroy it, then they send people in there to go clean it up. Same thing happened to you with your family. They destroy society, destroy the values, destroy your culture, destroy your belief system, destroy everything that's organic, and literally the land, literally your body and your mind and your soul are all being attacked. Once you're broken all the way down to nothing, this emptiness, you're basically just a zombie moping around, not knowing what it means to be alive, not knowing what it means to love. You just have this Barbie sort of mainstream Disney version of what love is. You have this fake version of what masculinity is and femininity is, and then watered down and mixed with all this other shit that's just kind of reacting to the chaotic program in the first place. So you're broken down, you're destroyed, and what plays as the superhero are these industries like Hollywood, specifically these movies. And since the majority of people only have an attention span for about an hour, something like that, that's where all this deeply rooted mind control comes from. Because people, the majority of our relationship with time itself, our relationships with our thoughts, our relationships with our expansion, our consciousness, are largely non-existent when you're trapped in the space of regurgitating other people's belief systems, the consciousness of who. So that's where the system wants to keep people. So on a regular basis, like you spend however many hours during the week just, in a robot, punching the clock, typing on the keyboard, punching the clock, typing on the keyboard. Then you go out to go see this movie with your kid. That's the realest shit. You were pretty much dead the entire week that you were working, just trying to keep it together, keep food on the table, stay at work, don't get fired, don't do this, don't do that, just maintain, survive. And then boom, this new movie comes out, and that's your actual humanity. The only humanity that you actually have is distributed to you by the industry of Hollywood, by the industry of all these cartoons and all these other things that are pre-generated to affect your subconscious in ways that we can't even realize. And largely we won't even realize until, if at all, but until many, many years down the line, we don't really know what's going to happen. And that's if you're an adult watching this stuff, knowing what's going on. You have these innocent minds of these innocent kids going into this place. They're getting the full spectrum of mind control. Zero filter there. No filter. Directly locked into their belief systems are being programmed to the 90th percentile. Whereas adults, they know the programming, so they might pick up like 70% of the mind control, because largely people still still thinking like a kid. You're still you might have a few more lessons to know how full of shit this industry is or what all this other stuff is, but largely you're not going to be able to do anything with that. So that goes into this system playing the numbers. Like I said, the system, the entity that profit off of this destruction doesn't care about time. It only cares about energy, consciousness, focusedness within that time. It's a completely different relationship than what we normally have with time. See, when you dream, when you're a dreamer and you go into your spaces, you have a different relationship with time. You have a different relationship with reality. You're more knowledgeable, you're more tapped in, and you can discern and differentiate between the realness of mind, the realness of your mind, your psyche that is in between your soul and your body, and what the system tells you to think and act and be like. See, what makes it easier to do it in the physical reality, to start to disassemble a lot of these things, is, like I've been saying in a lot of previous videos, is to go into the dream space, because that's still you there. When you wake up from a dream and you remember your dream, or you have a lucid dream and you remember all this stuff, that's still you there. You're having an experience, and that experience is being experienced in a realm where the laws of that realm are very different than here. It's more complex. In order to hold on to a dream, you can't bring linear interpretations into a dream. You'll break the dream and you'll wake up. Like, fear is a good linear interpretation for people who had never heard me talk about dreams before. Fear is a linear interpretation. This is why when you're in a nightmare and you get scared, you wake up. Pop right there, because that fear is a linear interpretation of something that was actually a challenge to you. See, you chose fear in there. You chose fear. If you were dreaming for like 20 or 30 years, you'd eventually work your way out of responding in fear, and you will start to face a lot of these things that happen in your nightmares. And those nightmares don't become nightmares anymore. Those nightmares now morph into challenges. So that stuff then that's a whole nother layer of consciousness, dream consciousness. You have nightmare consciousness, which is just your survival space, your physical reality. And then when you get into the psychological warfare of the dream consciousness, that's when you're challenging yourself. I just use that terminology. It's not really a warfare. It's just a space of expansion, but just to emphasize the relationship between the conscious physical reality and your subconscious dream reality. when you're in the psychological space of not being subjected in your dreams, not being subjected to the emotional body and the fight or flight mentalities, that kind of shallow sort of response, that's when you get into the space where the world needs to be more complex. And that's where you start challenging yourself. So now you can face these demons, you can face this darkness, you can face whatever it is, and then you are now expanding yourself. You're expanding your consciousness, and you have more, for lack of a better terminology, weapons in your arsenal. Like your arsenal of consciousness is more equipped now, because you're not limited to the emotional responses. You're not limited to one thing. Once you get into challenging yourself, you get good at challenging yourself, and then you can find the zone. Like athletes get in the zone. You get in the zone in the challenge space. Once you get into that space, that's when you start going into the dream aspects of spirituality. So, excuse me, or the spiritual warfare. So this is where you start getting real, and you start approaching the dream realm and your conscious reality from the macro interpretations of what's happening, not just to little old me, what's happening to just little old you, what's happening to all of us. How are all of our dreams being manipulated to act and feel a certain way? How are we being manipulated to fall into a lot of these mind control programs on a spiritual warfare level? In order to get into that macro space, you have to first have acknowledged and been working in the challenge dream space for a while now. So these are those layers of consciousness that are very similar to the layers of consciousness that I explained in the dream. They're very similar to the layers of consciousness I was explaining earlier, with the differences between the who, the what, the how, and the why. Those are all things that you have to study and get into on your own and expand your own. You have to do that work. Nobody else can do that work for you. And see, what the New Age community and the New Age mind control program is designed to do is to present you with like synthetic versions of that work. So you don't actually have to do that work. You just have to regurgitate the term, we're all one. That's low energy. Manifest your reality. These are all catch lines. They're all they're empty. They're nothing. They represent something that's real, but it's like looking at the answer key. It's like looking in the back of the book and only reading the back of the book, the answers in the back of the book. You never did the work though. So you never did the math, you never did the science, you never did the spirit, you never did any of that work. You just looked at the words and just said them out loud, and then boom. Now you're you're an enlightened being. You're woke. You're awakened and all this other shit. That's what the New Age agenda, that's at the epicenter of the New Age agenda, is to promote this shallow version of interpreting this reality, the shallow version of addressing this reality from the inside out, and turning it into a catchphrase, like a as seen on TV version of expanding consciousness. And then you have all of these little as seen on TV expanding consciousness warriors, like the spirit science community, the New Age community. People who are talking this woke shit, like what was that? Prince EA, and then you have like Ralph Smart and who are these other people? Teal Swan and David Wilcock and all these people who are in the New Age community who they're all talk. They're all talk. It's like, oh yeah, talk is just nothing. It's nothing real. It's nothing organic about what they're saying. It's just, oh yeah. So somebody's like when you see all the injustices around the world, they don't care about that. It's just like, oh no, manifest your reality. Don't focus on that. Okay, well, who's supposed to focus on this? If we're all one and your brothers and sisters are living in poverty because of some very real stuff that you can point out, we're all one and you're not saying anything about it. That's not your focus, because you're too busy over here manifesting your reality of, love and light and all this other shit that's out there. It's a commercial. It's an as seen on TV version of consciousness. And nothing actually moves. But since you have the answer key at your disposal, it's in your social media feed. You have that. You have the appearance of expanding your consciousness. You have the appearance of change. And another version of the appearance of change is the so-called evolution of these movies. So you watch the A Wrinkle in Time movie and you say, man, that was a lot of deep stuff that was in there. That makes a lot of sense. So these kids are learning a lot of things that I never knew. And you put that in comparison to movies like Mary Poppins back in the day, which they are revamping, and they're just going to, bring you right back down, bring the kids right back down to that Barbie shit again. But you think about like A Wrinkle in Time, and then you put that up next to the like a Jungle Book movie, or what's another just like regular ass Disney sort of, like Beauty and the Beast. I mean, like, what are the values and the morals in there? Largely, they're counterproductive. They're not really for you. But when you have movies nowadays that are, putting Rumi quotes in the video, I mean, come on, in the film, how could you not think that that's benevolent? That it's not benevolent. It's totally designed to appear a certain way. And that's pretty much what I had for this whole rundown of movie review of A Wrinkle in Time. It's not really worth seeing. It's specifically for kids. Like I said, I watch these movies because I want to disassemble them and use them, because that's an arsenal. That's weapons. Those are weapons against the people, against the children. How I see it, these are kids that are being hit with these subconscious bullets, this subconscious bombs that are being dropped from the Hollywood air bombers, just dropping bombs in people's backyards and dropping bombs in people's mentalities, and they're silent. They explode at certain times. They exist in your reality. That bomb sits in your body and it gives the appearance of fullness up to a certain amount of time. And when you reach that max out point, that bomb explodes, and the system banks on when that bomb explodes that was implanted into your brain, implanted into your consciousness 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. That system plans on you being weak by the time that bomb explodes. And when that bomb explodes, it will also explode you, and it will implode you, because you are so weak and have been so reliant on the power of the system instead of amplifying your own strength, that you have nothing to do but to implode from that bomb that was implanted in you, because it shrunk all the way down until it was so empty, it was so tiny, but it was still as potent. So just imagine a big giant bomb the size of a car being dropped in your subconscious when you're a kid, and it gives you this fullness. That's what A Wrinkle in Time is. It's a bomb the size of a car dropped into these kids' subconscious when they're 6 and 7 years old, and then over time, 6 and 7 years old, the whole surrounding life just chips away at their whole reality, and it just shrinks every part of them down into nothing and nothing and nothing. And then that car shrinks all the way down to nothing and nothing and nothing, because it's not as real as it used to be. The movie, when you saw it 6 and 7 years old, it was very real for you. When you're 20 years old, it's basically nothing. So it used to be the size of a car. Now it's the size of a peanut. But it's still as potent. It's still as strong. And since it's now the size of a peanut, how much space is now evacuated, how much empty space is now inside of your subconscious that used to be real, that is now emptiness. What are you going to fill it up with? People fill it with prescription drugs. They fill it with whatever kind of addictive behavior that's being promoted by the mainstream media. That's the profit making scheme. And then you get a triple profit back when people get sick and die because of the emptiness that was implanted a long time ago. And then when people are taken all the way to the extreme after they've been imploded and implanted with all of this nonsense, that bomb goes off inside of them. And that's when people have breakdowns. And then when the people have breakdowns, what does the system do? It medicates these kids. And it fills these kids with this poison that doesn't fill them up in any way. It just shrinks them down to the size of that peanut. So now that you're the size of that peanut, you feel full because you have that peanut in you're the size of a peanut and you feel full because your only reality is the peanut. And now the peanut is your drugs, your Ritalin and all that other stuff that they're pumping in these kids. And the same thing goes for the food. The way the food is designed is to be acting just like prescription drugs. In fact, the food is actually more dangerous than the prescription drugs. It's killing more people. Heart disease is a leading killer out there. So you have people, filling themselves because they're filling themselves with these poisons because the system has created empty people for profit. And movies like A Wrinkle in Time are designed to have that effect on people because as children, because when they grow up, there's a huge profit in the so-called rebuilding of the individual that you just broke down from childhood. Just like there's a huge profit in the university system after the public education system. And what are they feeding you? Nonsense, garbage, the same thing that comes through Hollywood. So that's pretty much what I had for this video. I'm sure there's some things that I missed that I'll remember later on, and I'll probably add it in a later video. But that's the majority of how I was seeing A Wrinkle in Time. I went in on this movie before I even saw the movie a couple times, actually, when I was referencing the It and specifically the Wrinkle in Time just from the trailers. I haven't even read the book either, so yeah, if you're interested in it, it's interested in seeing how complex it is. I could barely, as soon as I sat down, I just wanted to leave. I wanted to get out of there. It's how it is with most movies anyway. But unless you're really going in there just to disassemble what's going on, I wouldn't recommend seeing it at all. It's just another Disney. It's going to be hard for an adult to sit through it because it's a total focus on kids movie. But I understand the subconscious programming that's going with each frame, each block, each image that they show, because it's going on and on, and it's flickering. So each image, each angle, each camera angle, each look, each perspective, each emotion, everything in the background, that's the only thing that allows me to keep watching a lot of these movies, because I focus on the intricacies of the entire thing and kind of really don't even really pay attention to. I don't miss the main plot and the main theme, but that's not what I'm paying attention to. So if people haven't done that before, that's another way that you can start to disassemble and analyze these storylines, because you better believe that that's how these movies are made. They're made not by making you focus on the movie plot. What makes a good movie is how it really affects you on the macro scale, your subconscious. That's exactly what makes a good movie a good movie. But since these kids are so trapped in linear programming and still very simple in the way they perceive their reality, they're going to only focus on the main plot and totally download without any filters the umpteenth degree of the 90th percentile of the mind control. And like I said, this is not a game. This is not something to just be like, oh yeah, you're taking this too seriously. If you're in that space, don't even bother commenting. Don't even bother like watching any of the other movies, because you're already lost. You're already trapped in that little bubble of you just thinking and believing in this system. If you're like sympathizing with this colonial agenda, you're just in that space of inhumanity already, and you don't even know it. This system makes money off of, like, energetic money off of inhumanity. That's what this system is based upon. And that system wants to, the it system wants to make more, to make people also think and act and mimic that same thing so they can be trapped in the who programming. As long as you're trapped in following the system that gets promoted. See, like, I didn't really go into the depths of the racism program, but just like I explained throughout this whole breakdown of the who consciousness, the what, the how, and the why, the same thing goes for how so-called white people have been promoted overall since colonialism, since they coined America as a new world and then genocided everybody and then started to promote itself as the savior because they were the new world creators against the old world primitives and savages. And since everybody just kept watching the Disney movie and believing the cowboys and Indians and believing the politics and believing the forefathers, nobody really paid attention to the real storyline that went on and just bought into everything that was sold by the entities who created this control grid. So that's just another example of how these movies affect us. It's the same kind of alchemy, just dressed in a different style every time, every single time. So yeah, I gotta rolling with this one. I was on a roll with this gun, so it's good. But yeah, that's what I had for this video. So thank you for joining me. Thank you again for the support. If you feel guided to, go ahead and like and subscribe and share if you haven't already. And until next time, from all my relations, peace, love, and harmony.